So thank you for allowing me to ask a question. So my daughter is going through a divorce, and she separated from her husband about 2 months ago. And they had agreed to share caring for their 13-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter by alternating weeks. And my grandson refused to stay with his mom when she lived with me. But he said that when she lived on her own, he would live with her. So last month she got her own place, and she drove both children to her new place, and the 13-year-old refused to get out of the car. He actually told my daughter that he loves his dad and that he hates her, and he refuses to stay with her. So the divorce is very, very difficult for everybody, but I'm wondering, what advice can you give us? What can we do to convince him to live with his mom?
아이를 위해서 부모가 있어야 합니까? 부모를 위해서 아이가 있어야 합니까?
So does the child exist for the parents, or do the parents exist for the child?
I'd say both. The parents exist for the child and vice versa.
자연 생태계를 보세요. 어미를 위해서 새끼가 존재합니까? 새끼를 위해서 어미가 존재합니까?
Alright, then let's go back to the nature. Does the parent, exist for the child, or does the child take care of the parent?
No, the parent takes care of the child.
제 스스로 살아가지 못하기 때문에, 어린아이는 제 스스로 살아가지 못하기 때문에 보호를 할 사람이 필요합니다. 그 보호자가 지금 부모가 되어 있는 것입니다.
So a small child cannot survive on its own. That's why you need a protector. And the parent is the protector.
부모가 아기를 갖고 싶다. 부모가 아기 없으면 못 살겠다 하는 것은 부모를 위해서 아기가 존재하는 것입니다.
So when the parents say that I want a child, or I cannot live without this child, then that child in that case exists for the parents.
그것은 사람이 아니고 애완용 동물이나 장난감이나 이런 나를 위로하는 어떤 대상으로서의 아이기 때문에 그것은 바람직한 자세는 아닙니다.
So in that case, you're regarding the child as a pet or a toy or as a source of comfort to yourself. So it's not a good dynamic. It's not a good relationship.
우리가 애완용 동물은 사람을 위해서 애완용 동물이 있습니까? 동물을 위해서 사람들이 애완용 동물을 기릅니까?
So when you actually raise a pet or adopt a pet, do you adopt a pet as a source of comfort to yourself, or does the pet exist, or do you exist for the pet?
So, my daughter wants to be there to provide what he needs and be there for her son. What's difficult is there's the husband that gets involved as well. So, she's telling her son that she cares for him, tries to get be in touch with him, but it's difficult when he's refusing to be with her.
네, 너 사랑한다고 껴안으면, 상대가 싫다는데 껴안으면 이게 사랑입니까? 성추행입니까?
So say, you like somebody and you want to embrace that somebody, but that somebody does not want to embrace you, but you force yourself upon that somebody. What is that? Is that love?
So am I hearing, do we need to give him space and let him come around to her?
상대가 싫어하는 거를 내 좋다고 하는 것은 사랑도 아니고 그것은 성추행이지 않습니까?
If you force yourself upon somebody else and when that somebody else is refusing, then, that's abuse. That's not love.
우리가 애완용 동물을 키우는 것도 사람들의 필요에 의해서지 동물을 위해서가 아닙니다.
And so when you actually raise a pet, you're doing that for yourself, not for the pet.
그러나 사람들은 다 동물을 위해서라고 말하지 않습니까?
But everybody says they're actually there for the pet.
내가 아이들을 필요로 하는 것은 맞지가 않습니다. 그 애완용 동물에 불과합니다.
So you don't want to treat the child as a pet, to be there for your comfort.
두 사람이 서로 좋아해서 만나고 싫어해서 헤어지는 것은 자유입니다.
So it's, you're free to meet and love each other and also to separate and divorce.
그러나 그 사이에 아이들이 있다면 아이들에 대한 고려를 해야 됩니다.
But you have children because of this union, then you have to take the children into account.
아이들은 왜 엄마 아빠가 헤어지는지 알 수가 없잖아요.
Because children have no idea why their parents are separated.
정말 아이에 대해서 필요로 하는 역할을 꼭 하고 싶다면 헤어지지 말아야 합니다.
So if you really want to play the roles, for the child, then you shouldn't have separated.
어떤 아이가 엄마 아빠가 헤어지는 것을 둘 중에 하나를 선택하는 것을 원하겠습니까?
Because which child would want to face that choice of choosing one parent over another?
그러니까 헤어질 때는 이미 아이보다는 자기 인생이 더 중요하다 이런 관점입니다.
So when you have separated and divorced, the perspective you brought upon that decision is that your life is more important than you taking care of the child.
그러니까 기본적으로 부모 자격을 상실한 겁니다.
So in that sense, you have gave up your core responsibility as a parent.
그러니까 이제 아이에게 물어야 합니다. 너는 어떻게 살 것인가?
So that's why you have to, out of respect to your child, you have to ask the child, how do you want to live your life?
엄마든 아빠든 또는 제3자도 아이가 이제는 결정할 권리가 있습니다.
Because right now the child now has the right to make that decision whether it's to live with a dad, to live with a mom, or live somewhere else.
그러니까 이혼을 할 때 이미 부모 자격이 상실되고 이제 이 아이를 누가 돌볼 건지는 새로 정해야 됩니다.
So when you actually got divorced, you have given up in a way your core responsibility as a parent. Now that gives that child the right to choose how he wants his life to be.
근데 아이가 원하지 않는다면 아이의 뜻을 따라야 합니다.
So if the child does not want it, then you have to allow the child to make that decision.
만약에 나중에 아이가 원하면 그때 돌봐야 합니다.
But if the child changes its mind and wants to be taken care of by the mom, then that's what you do.
Okay. Yeah, I follow that train of thought. And then I know the decision to get a divorce was not done lightly. There was some physical altercations, and there was the fact that the husband was not providing he wasn't being a true partner in the marriage. So it just this situation with the grandson is just heartbreaking. I was hoping you'd have some other advice, but I understand what you're saying about giving, let him choose.
결혼을 할 때는 어떤 어려움이 있더라도 함께 하자 이렇게 우리가 약속했지 않습니까?
So when we got married, we swore to each other to be there for the good times and the bad times.
그러니까 남편에게 네가 약속을 어겼다. 그러니까 안 살겠다. 이 말은 네가 약속을 어겼다는 핑계로 나도 약속을 깨겠다. 이 얘기 아닙니까?
So when you tell your husband that you broke the promise, you broke the oath, I'm not going to live with you anymore, it's that you're basically using the fact that the husband broke the promise, broke the deal to get out of the deal yourself.
남자는 자기 나름대로 이유가 있어서 약속을 못 지킨 거고 여자는 약속을 안 지킨다는 이유로 역시 약속을 안 지키는 거 아닙니까?
So one side, the man in this case, was not able to live up to his promise for whatever reason, and using that as an excuse, the woman starts to get out of that deal.
여기서 뭐 헤어질 수는 있습니다.
And it is right, her decision to separate.
네, 그러나 거기에 어떤 핑계를 대는 것은 저는 바람직하지 않다고 생각합니다.
But I don't think it's good to actually excuse that for whatever reason.
그러니까 계약을 했다가 계약을 해지하는 거니까 상대를 원망할 필요는 없습니다.
So simply put, this is a contract that you entered, and you dissolve the contract, and there's no reason for you to, hold any hatred or emotion.
그러나 아이 입장에서는 그 양자가 다 자기 아빠 아니면 엄마라는 데 문제가 있습니다.
However, the problem is if you look at it from the child's perspective, they're both your parents, the child's parents, mom and dad.
엄마의 말에 따르면 아빠는 나쁜 사람이다 이렇게 되지 않습니까?
So if you listen to the mom, then dad becomes the bad guy.
그러면 아빠가 나쁜 사람인데 내가 그 아들인데 어떻게 내가 자존감을 가질 수 있겠습니까?
Then how can I feel good about myself if my dad is the bad guy?
그렇기 때문에 헤어지는 건 좋은데 서로를 비난해서는 안 됩니다. 아이를 위해서.
So it's good. It's okay for you to split, and separate, but you should not criticize each other for the sake of the child.
아이 엄마나 아이 아빠를 비난하는 것은 아이에게 정신적으로 엄청난 마음의 상처를 줍니다.
So one side criticizing the other brings about huge trauma and hurts the child.
엄마 아빠가 헤어지기 때문에 아이가 상처를 받는 게 아니라 서로 비난하기 때문에 상처를 받는 거예요.
It's not the fact of the split that's hurting the child. It's the criticism of each other that's hurting the child.
그렇기 때문에 아이가 아빠하고 살고 싶다면 그 뜻을 존중하고 그러나 아이가 또 엄마하고 살고 싶다면 그때 내가 아무리 어렵더라도 또 아이를 받아들여야 합니다.
So currently, if the child wants to live with his dad, then you got to respect his wishes. At a later time, if he wants to live with a mom, then no matter how difficult or awkward that situation might be later on, you have to accept the child and allow him to live with you.
아이가 아빠하고 살고 싶다면 내가 아무리 보고 싶더라도 자제하고 아이가 아빠하고 잘 살도록 도와줘야 합니다.
But if the child wants to live with the dad, no matter how much you miss her, you got to do everything you can, even to suppressing your own desire to see him, so that he adapts well and lives well with his dad.
아이는 물건이 아닙니다. 이걸 가지고 네 거니 내 거니 하는 것은 올바르지 않다.
Because a child is not a thing. It's none of your possession. So, to take a child and say, this is mine, this child is mine, or this child is yours, is not a good way.
솔로몬의 지혜로운 얘기라는 거 아시죠?
I'm sure you well know King Solomon's story.
두 엄마가 한 아이를 두고 서로 자기 엄마라고 다퉈서 해결이 안 돼서 솔로몬 왕에게 갔습니다.
Because two mothers, two women were insisting the child was, theirs respectively. So they went to King Solomon to resolve.
왜 자기 아이인지를 둘 다 아주 자세하게 설명했기 때문에 보통 사람은 그것을 분간할 수가 없었습니다.
An ordinary person could not tell the claims apart because both were very convincing.
그래서 솔로몬 왕이 그러면 아이를 반을 잘라서 반씩 가져가라고 했습니다.
So King Solomon said, I'm going to split the child, you each take half.
그러니까 엄마가 아이를 포기했습니다.
And the real mom gave up her claim.
그러자 솔로몬 왕이 그 사람이 엄마인 줄을 알았다는 거예요.
And that allowed the King Solomon to determine who the real mother was.
그처럼 정말 아이의 엄마고 아이를 사랑한다면 아이의 선택권을 존중해야 되고 또 남자로서 내 남편으로서는 남자가 부족하지만은 아이의 아빠로서는 항상 존중하고 존중해야 된다는 겁니다.
So if you are the mom of the child, then you have to respect the wishes of your own child. And although the husband was not a good husband, but as a dad to your child, you got to respect his rights and his role.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I'll share your advice with my daughter, and for sure, neither of the parents should criticize the other parent, and so she's already been working on not being critical of the ex-husband. She's been actually, she's been very good about that. And we'll just, I guess, we'll let him know we love him, but we'll let it go.
부부가 헤어지면 전 남편, 전 아내라고 부를 필요도 없습니다.
So if you're a couple and you split, you don't have to even call each other ex anything.
내 사랑하는 아이의 아빠, 내 사랑하는 아이의 엄마, 내 사랑하는 아이의 엄마를 존중하고 내 사랑하는 아이의 아빠를 존중하는 자세를 가져야 됩니다.
Basically, your perspective should be, that's the dad of a child that I love, or that's the mom of a child that I love.
우리 두 사람의 남녀 관계는 끝이 났습니다.
Because your relationship as a couple is over.
그러나 아이의 엄마, 아이의 아빠로서 존중해야 된다는 겁니다.
But you do still have to respect them as the dad of the child that you love.
그러니까 질문 자도 아이의 아빠로서의 그 사위를 존중해야 합니다.
So, the questioner yourself, as a former mother-in-law, you have to respect him for his role as the dad of the grandson that you love.
그래야 손자가 좋은 사람이 됩니다.
And that's the way to allow your child to be a good person.
네.
Yeah, and through the class, I've been working on my relationship with my son-in-law, and so I am appreciative of him as being the father of my grandchildren. So I continue to learn through Jungto Society. So thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you.
그러면 이 두 사람의 질문에 대해서 자기 의견이 있거나 대화를 하실 분이 있으면 참가해서 대화를 함께 나눠주시면 좋겠습니다.
So at this point, I want to open the floor to the others. And if you have any feedback or inputs to the conversation we just had with the two questioners, please feel free to add your voice.
I appreciated the information that Sunim provided today. I was a little bit. I felt that sometimes the situation that described, maybe we should be a little bit more careful in our recommendations. In that description, she did mention that there was some violence that occurred in the house. And I also, I didn't write down Sunim's words, but and maybe I didn't understand the translation correctly, but my understanding was that that what was said was that when a parent breaks the social contract by divorcing, that that kind of they give up their rights as a parent. It sounded something like that was what I understood, and I was a little bit concerned with that because I can imagine a situation in which one parent is violent to another parent to the point where the original parent's life is in danger, and then the child, and the thing I heard Sunim say is that once there's a divorce, then the child can decide which parent to live with, and they can decide how they want to live their life and get much more autonomy as a result of that. And my concern is that, for example, that the one parent who stays because they are being violent towards the other parent might not have the child's best interests at heart. And so the parent who leaves, by leaving, I think doesn't automatically relinquish all of their parental rights and should perhaps we can find some grace there that the parent who has left for legitimate reasons may need to still be in that child's life. despite the fact that the child at that time doesn't want that. So I just wanted a little bit more dialogue about that. Thank you.
네, 뭐 여러 가지 상황이 있기 때문에 어떤 일률적으로 정할 수는 없습니다.
Yes, it is truly that, each situation is so different. It's very hard to kind of standardize a response that's consistent across all different situations.
만약에 아이를 때린다고 하면 그건 경찰에 신고를 해야 될 일이고요.
For example, if any parent's abusive towards a child itself, then that's a matter for the police.
또 아내를 때리거나 남편을 때린다 하더라도 폭력은 법의 제재를 받습니다.
Or either it's violent against one spouse or another, wherever that may be, that's something that should be subject to police or legal matters.
그래서 먼저 폭력 때문에 이혼한다 하기 이전에 폭력은 신고를 해서 먼저 처벌을 받아야 됩니다.
So in a way, violence is not exactly an excuse for divorce. Violence is something that should be reported and dealt with.
네. 그래서 폭력이 시정이 되더라도 이혼을 할 거냐 안 할 거냐 하는 것은 이제 폭력은 이혼 사유가 되니까 그것은 이제 결정을 할 수가 있습니다. 이혼을 할 건지 말 건지는 이제 당사자들이 결정합니다.
So even if the violence situation is taken care of, violence is a legitimate cause for divorce, and there's something for the couple to decide on.
또 부부가 이혼을 안 해도 폭력을 행사하면 아이는 그 부부는 더 이상 아이를 케어할 그러니까 보호할 자격이 없기 때문에 제3자가 보호를 하도록 돼 있습니다.
And even if they don't get a divorce, if the violence is still continuous, rampant against abuses against the child, and if there's a violent abuse against the child, I mean the couple themselves, the parents themselves, have basically relinquished their right to be parents.
아이들은 자랄 때 안전하게 자랄 권리가 있습니다.
Because a child has a right to be protected when they grow up.
부모가 마약을 하거나 부모가 폭력을 행사하거나 범죄를 행사하거나 할 때 아이의 삶의 환경에 나쁜 영향을 지나치게 준다 하면 아이는 다른 제3자가 돌봐야 합니다.
If the parents cannot provide a household that's safe and nurturing, for example, because they're violent or they're addicted to drugs or they're engaged in other violent crimes, then the child has the right to be protected by a third party.
즉 아이는 소유물이 아니라는 거예요.
So I think the core point of what I'm saying is that the child is no one's possession.
아이가 그것을 결정하기 어려운, 다시 말하면 아주 4살 아래라든지 이렇게 그런 분별이 없다 하면 제3자가 그 상황을 보고 결정을 합니다.
And if the child is too young, to discriminate or to discriminate different situations or conditions or to judge for himself, then a third party should make that decision for him.
아이가 어느 정도 의사를 표명할 수 있다면 아이의 의사를 어느 정도 존중해서 아마 판사가 결정할 거예요.
But if the child is of age in which he or she can express an opinion, individual opinion, then you have to take that opinion into account.
아이를 돌봐야 할 의무는 있지만 부모는 돌볼 권리는 없습니다.
Because a parent has the responsibility to take care of a child, but they don't necessarily have the right to take care of the child.
네, 또 다른 분 얘기 나누시기 바랍니다.
Anybody else would like to add to the conversation?
I just wanted to add that there was a physical incident that took place, and so she did experience a physical situation that made her leave the house. In addition to that, there was a lot of mental, verbal abuse. But the question we had is, he's 13, and I don't know if he is of age to make the best decision. if we talk to the lawyer is saying, you could have a police officer escort him to your house, but we don't want to do that. That'd be too traumatic. So she's just expressing to him how much she loves him and that she would like to be in his life. And then there's a legal process. We could file papers to ask the court to, I guess, tell him he has to come to her house, but that's paper, and he does the 13-year-old. I don't know how much effect it would have on a 13-year-old, but yeah, it's been very difficult.
네, 그것은 폭력적 행위가 있다면 그것은 법원에 그러니까 고소를 해서 법원의 판결을 받아서 범죄면 처벌을 받아야 됩니다.
If there was an incident of violence, then that should be, prosecuted, and he should be punished for it.
그러니까 법원의 판결이 없이 어떤 얘기를 하는 것은 사회적으로 반영이 되지 않습니다.
But without that kind of a legal judgment, an incident of violence, without a legal judgment, kind of lacks that power to be criticized.
왜냐하면 사람은 이렇게 생각하는 사람, 저렇게 생각하는 사람, 사람마다 다 견해가 다르기 때문에 우리가 그냥 들어서는 누구 말이 더 정확하냐 하는 걸 알 수가 없습니다.
Because it's very difficult, because everybody brings different perspective into the situation. It's very difficult to determine what exactly happened based on he says, she says.
그런 폭력이나 폭언은 이혼 사유가 되지 자녀를 보호하는 것하고는 관계가 없습니다.
But having said that, any incident of violence, whether it's verbal, mental, or physical, it is a justifiable cause for divorce, but that's separate in itself from protecting the child.
그러나 아이가 아빠의 어떤 협박을 받았어. 두려움 때문에 아빠를 선택했다. 이런 의심이 든다면 아까 변호사와 경찰을 대동해서 아이의 정확한 의사를 확인할 필요는 있습니다.
But if you do suspect that the child is somehow being threatened or coerced by the dad into expressing his preference against the mother, and that's something that you should look into by bringing all the legal tools necessary.
근데 아이가 엄마를 미워한다 하면 이거는 확인할 필요가 별로 없을 것 같습니다.
But the way you phrased it, if you're saying the child hates the mother or expressed hatred towards the mother, but I think that's a separate issue.
Yeah, he had never said that before. That was one time that he said that, and it was shocking to me.
네, 그러면 그게 의심이 된다. 아이를 위해서 아이가 혹시 협박을 받아서 이런 결정을 했나 하고 의심이 된다면 그것은 변호사를 대동해서 경찰과 변호사를 대동해서 그 진위를 확인할 필요는 있다고 생각합니다.
But if you do suspect the child is somehow being threatened or coerced by the dad, I think that is something that you should use the lawyers and the police to take a look into to determine the truth of that.
그러나 그것은 내가 아이를 데려오고 싶어서 설득하려고 하는 입장을 가져서는 안 되고 혹시 아이가 위험에 빠지는 것을 방지하기 위해서 혹시라도 이런 관점이어야 합니다.
But even if you do that, you should not be motivated by your desire to live with your child. You should be motivated by the desire to make sure your child is in a safe space.
네.
Right, thank you. I think I can also probably add a little comment to this scenario as well that we've just been talking about. My job is actually in child psychiatry, and I see a lot of teens come into the office, usually force brought with their mother, a lot of single moms or freshly divorced folks, and they usually bring the kids over and they ask, like, fix the problem, doc. And I've given medications. We've tried to force therapy on kids as well. But the more we end up forcing, the more the kids usually just end up hating the parent and I've seen it, and I've seen it. It happens in my office like often, and and I usually end up having to be like sort of the figure to kind of like mediate a little bit of the situation, or have the mom or dad kind of relieve some of the pressure from them. But I think the old adage goes, it's like you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And you try to force them to make him drink, they start hating you more. So I mean, honestly, the child is 13. I think they're going to make mistakes, and I understand it's very painful to hear some of those things that they're saying, and maybe they probably would be better off with mom, because it sounds like mom is responsible and really has the child's best interest. A lot of times, some of the other partners, they let the kids kind of do whatever, and that's why the kids tend to like to be with the dad more. But I mean, like a teaching realization and motivation, all of that kind of has to come internally through life experiences and such. So I think part of the initial thing to do is kind of go through our own grief process and kind of let things happen as they may. But hopefully, as you continue to work and develop your relationship with your grandchild, things will come around.
네. 특별한 사정이 아니면 자녀들은 어릴 때 엄마가 키우는 게 정상입니다. 가장 잘 키울 수 있고요.
If it's not, if it's a normal, regular situation, if at all possible, it is, it's best for the mother to take care of the young.
5살 이하라면 저는 엄마가 정신적인 질환이 있거나 특별한 경우가 아니면 엄마가 키우는 게 옳다고 생각합니다.
And especially if the child is under 5, in case of some extreme, situation, maybe mental illness for the mother or not, if besides those situation, I think it's best for the mother to take care of the child.
그 다음에 13살까지는 엄마가 키우면 좋지만은 엄마가 부적절하다면 아빠가 키워도 괜찮다고 생각합니다.
But after 5 to 13, it'd be best, for the child to stay with the mom. But if that situation doesn't, present itself, then I think it's okay for the dad to raise the child too.
13살이 넘으면 사회적으로는 아직 미성년이지만 육체적으로는 거의 성인이 돼갑니다.
But after 13, although from a society's perspective, still underage, but from a physical maturity perspective, he is coming to his own.
만약에 우리가 자연 속에서 동물처럼 자랐다면 13살이면 완전히 자기 인생을 자기가 살아야 합니다.
Because if we were, say, living still embedded in nature, 13 is full maturity.
그렇기 때문에 이것은 본인의 의사를 거의 80-90% 존중해야 된다고 생각합니다.
So I think in this case, I think we should respect the boy's opinion, 80-90% of the time.
그리고 이제 18세 이상 성인이 되면 이제 100% 본인의 의사에 존중하고 또 집에 같이 살지 않아도 됩니다. 성인이기 때문에.
Then after 18, you should respect, as an adult, to an adult, respect his opinion 100% of the time. And after 18, there's no need for you to live with him.
네, 오늘 여기까지 하겠습니다.
With that, let's conclude today's session.
네.